All right. So I want to start by reading a little bit and telling you a little bit about what happened in John 6. And Jesus starts talking in John 6 about something that's really tough. It's stuff that we've argued about for the next 2,000 years. So it's not like he's the only one that it only puzzled us. People have been puzzled throughout the history of humankind with how people view and struggle with Bible. And so Jesus was disputing with the Jews. How can this be? How can this man give us his flesh to eat? Well, and see, that's something we've always tried to figure out. What is this thing called communion? What's it mean, right? And Jesus answers in part, at least, but the one who eats this bread, this is the bread that came down from heaven, not like that which your ancestors ate and they died, but the one who eats this bread will live forever. And everyone gets mad at him. And even his disciples said, Jesus, this teaching is difficult. Who can accept it? And sometimes that's the problem, is that we have things that are unacceptable. Sometimes we have things that are just plain hard. Let me share just a little picture with you so you can see it. This is kind of the agenda for the day, but you can kind of see that there are three types. Look, I didn't even write it right. There are three types of troublesome Bible passages. The ones that are hard to understand, the ones that are hard to accept, and the ones that are hard to follow. So I think everyone knows each other here. So I want you to just take a moment and tell me one Bible passage that you either don't like because you don't understand it, you can't accept it, you can't follow it, or that you struggle to try to do one of those things. So who would like to share first some passage that's not your easiest? Joyce, what's a passage you don't like?
Gosh, I can't think of any just right offhand. I need to think about this.
Okay.
There's all kinds of them, I guess. But I can't think of anything in specific.
Yeah, I'm going to show you a whole bunch later on. Some of those will help as you go through. But Earl, Sandy, do you have one that's tougher for you?
I guess this is Earl. When I run across a passage like this, I think I have to put it in my understanding of what I need to get from the Bible. And I think he's trying to educate me. And so it's more a matter of understanding rather than you're going to have to eat something or you're taking in something that's going to help you.
Yeah. See, some passages are just that way. I just don't get it. I can see the sense in it. It just doesn't make sense completely to me yet. Mm-hmm. So you're right. Sometimes it is just a learning. What can I learn to help me to understand that?
Well, one for me is that the only way to heaven is through Jesus.
And people sometimes use that to batter each other around, don't they?
Yeah.
And that's often the hard part about passages, is not necessarily that they're good or bad. It's that it's troublesome to me because it agrees with you and not with me. Mm-hmm. Right? And you use it somehow to go in one direction that I just can't go, or that I don't understand why you're going that way. And so it separates us because of that. And so we struggle. In reality, the passage makes it so that we're struggling with each other because we can't agree with where that passage is going. And you find great comfort sometimes in an interpretation of a passage, which for me might give me great consternation. The good news is that same thing which can sometimes separate us can also bring us together. Because when we don't understand a passage, one of the best places to go is to each other, to try to figure out, give me some more insights. Show me something from your perspective. sometimes when we do that, it makes the passage come alive differently. So as we go through this class, that's one of the things we're going to do. So I want you to start making lists of some of the things that are difficult for you, so that then we can bring it into the light of us and maybe find some different insights. Not necessarily even better, but different, so that we can see a passage larger than what we did before. Okay? The second thing are things like the commentaries. Okay, commentaries have these educated people who have thought about things and can sometimes show us, this is what this meant back in the day. Let me give you an example. How many have heard that scripture about it is harder for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle?
Yeah.
Right? And people have often used that to be able to say, not very many people get into heaven, and that's why, because it's really hard. And commentators will tell you that that's probably talking about a specific space in the Holy Land that is it's a metaphoric space where a camel has to enter differently than usual, get down on knees and cross through because of the size of the opening. It's challenging, but it's a different way that you have to think about things. It's not about it's not talking about a sewing needle that no camel can enter. It's talking about a place that is very difficult or challenging if you're trying to do it the normal way. And if you see it in that historic perspective, then you don't overlay it with whatever your image is, which is probably that sewing needle rather than more of the camel image. And so sometimes those commentaries, those books of literature that scholarly people have written, help us a lot in that. Okay? The third thing about scripture is if we try to go into it with just ourselves and whatever we overlay on it, then we sometimes miss out. And what we have to figure out is how to look at it through the eyes of Spirit. Okay? John 14, one of my favorite passages, where Jesus says, I'm leaving, but he says, I promise that the Spirit will come. And the Spirit will lead you to all truth. And if we can somehow rest in something larger speaking to us, drawing us, helping us to understand, then that helps. So prayer and meditation and resting in that space where we can hear a larger voice can sometimes help us, especially in the passages that are especially onerous to us, the ones that have been used to batter. We've been awful through the history of Christianity about using the Bible as a weapon against. And those passages we really have a hard time reconciling back towards ourselves because of how they've been used so horribly. But if we can somehow rest in that larger voice of the divine, that helps us to sometimes get past the terrible voices that have put the blockages for us. It also helps if we don't isolate scriptures too much. If we try to make a passage by itself tell the whole of the truth, then we will often fail. But if we can go to a larger question where a larger view where we look at the whole of the gospel, then it helps us a lot to be able to get through it. So if I'm looking at it from the smallest possible space, then I fail. But if I look at it from the largest space, then sometimes it takes it gives perspective on it. Catherine, how are you? Down in the bottom left-hand corner is a mute button if you would like to push it and you could talk. There you go.
Okay, let me straighten up here a little bit. So good afternoon. I had a little trouble getting into the site, but now I'm finally here at long last. So yeah.
Good. I'm glad you're here. Thank you for being here. This is Joyce and Earl and Sandy are here with you.
Wonderful.
Okay. So as we go through, let me just recapture what I just said. The resources that we're going to use are each other, the commentaries, the scholars who have learned things. We're going to use Holy Spirit and prayer and meditation and all the ways we can access that. And then we're going to try to look at it from the largest perspective, the whole of what the gospel and the Bible is saying, rather than just a very small sliver of it. If we can do that, then maybe we can figure out how to let these enter into our lives better. But at the core of all this is the question, can you just reject part of the Bible? And the bottom line answer, just so you know, is yes. You don't have to take every single piece of the Bible as equally authoritative, meaningful, important. There are parts that we know that Jesus talked about, that we know some of what he said superseded some of that. But you want to be careful rejecting that just because there's reasons why at the time it was important, which might give us some insights about what could be important today. Okay, so things like don't eat shellfish, which most of us tend to do if we go to, well, I guess we can't go there now, but if we go to one of those ocean restaurants, right? Chances are you'll eat crab or lobster or shrimp or something, and all of that's forbidden in the Bible. But why was it forbidden? And what do we do about it today? Mostly, many of the things are situationally bad, because a shellfish doesn't last very long, spoils very quickly, and so it said don't do that because it was a health reason type of thing. We don't have that same restriction today, but it's important for us to look and say, what is good for us as we eat, and what is more dangerous to us? What gets in the way in our eating habits? Today, it might be a whole different set of things that the divine voice might be saying is unacceptable. Okay, many of our not farming techniques so much as the processing techniques put in these preservatives for us. Fluff up our chickens so they're wonderful, but also make it so it fluffs us up quite a bit. And so I think the divine voice might say, don't eat processed foods as much, right? Because those are not as healthy for us. But then that means I have to get the more expensive food, or I have to get the one that's harder to find, or whatever. It's a challenge, and it's not stated exactly in the Bible, but that's what we have to figure out. Is there something from that might draw forward? So let me stop and let you talk for a second and tell me, is there a piece of the Bible that you think you might want to reject? Some piece that you say, yeah, I'd rather not deal with that one. Something that's been used against you, or that has been used incorrectly, or that just doesn't apply today.
Well, the women are second-class citizens and they should sit in the back.
Sandy, you are exactly right. We should reject that view. Do you know why it's there in the Bible?
Because the men were in control.
Because the men were in control of everything, and it just wasn't questioned from either side of the gender divide. It wasn't even accepted there. And so even as Jesus moved some of that difference there, Christian leadership moving forward wasn't able to maintain, I think, the same egalitarianism that Jesus had.
Right.
And so there's a bunch of passages, both in the Old Testament and in the later New Testament after Jesus's time, that people use all the time about saying, you women.
Yeah.
How about the rest of you?
I struggle with the whole book of Revelations.
Then you need to be there Thursday night.
Yeah, I'm gonna try.
Because because nobody at St. Francis should struggle with the book of Revelation. You know why?
I
It
can't.
was written for you.
Okay.
I mean that seriously. I mean that the book of Revelation was written not for the majority, but for the people who were in more minority spaces, struggling with, and in a very real way, under persecution. People that are in power and authority and in strength use that book very differently than what it's supposed to be used.
Yeah.
And the Christian church, and by that I kind of mean today the strong part of the church, which is the majority voice, the conservative voice, has used that in a way that allows them to use it as a bludgeon against people, and it's absolutely the wrong way to use it. So you should struggle with the interpretation that people have put on that book,
Yeah.
but not on the book itself. So come back on Thursday night and learn more about it.
I'm gonna try.
Okay, and if not, I'll go back to what I said right at the beginning. We'll be recording that book is on that discussion as well, and so you can go online and you'll be able to see that Karen has set up a place where you can hear the class later on. Okay.
Okay, good.
And that's true of all of the classes that I'm going to be doing this week. All right. So I'm going to give us this week. I'm going to give us some passages just to start with, and it's a set of passages that are all connected up, and we've heard them a lot of times, and we're going to talk about why they can be troublesome to us. Then I'm going to give you a list of other passages that you can look at. But what I want you to do is this week, I want you to go and find the passages that are your favorite to struggle with, the ones that you don't enjoy struggling with. Okay? So, Matthew 5 through 7 is called the Sermon on the Mount. How many have heard of that? Pretty well-known passage. So let's just start and look at some of the things that it says. Matthew 5 verse 5 says, "Blessed are the meek." Now think about us in America. How do we in any way, shape, or form validate that saying in America? Most of what we do says the opposite, that the meek have no blessedness about them. So how do we in America give credence to that passage? How do we become the meek that become blessed when everything about us says differently?
Well, we take the word blessed as meaning the privileged people. When you're blessed, you're given extra things, and so we don't see that as being something that meek people, when you're meek, you don't have your hand out.
Yeah.
So you don't get everything that you should get unless you ask for it.
Again, that goes back to what we were just talking about the book of Revelation. If you're coming from a place of power and wealth, blessed is always interpreted through the lens of more money, more strength.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not what Jesus is trying to say here. In a very real way, he's trying to just throw people's preconceptions out the window. right? You know how at the beginning of this of any message, at least part of the job is let me surprise you and capture your attention in some way. Maybe I tell a really good story, makes you feel good, and so you keep listening to me. And this is the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount, and Jesus is trying to say, I got stuff you should listen to. And so he tosses a bunch of stuff out there that makes no sense. And he essentially says, listen to me because I'm going to tell you why. So keep listening. Look at chapter 5, verse 11. Blessed are you when people revile you and persecute you. How many know that you have not felt very blessed in those moments? Right? And so it automatically makes us want to argue, but that engages our souls. And Jesus is drawing us into a place where maybe we will listen differently than what we would before then. Because he has some very important things to say to us. If you are angry with a brother or sister, you will be liable to judgment, he said. And I'm angry with a brother or sister on a regular basis, mostly when I'm driving in my car somewhere, and they get in my way. Right? But I think I'm right. And so I don't want to think that it should be me liable to judgment because they're the one not driving okay. They're driving too slow or whatever it is that I think is right. So I want to point the finger at them, which is what we typically do, don't we? We blame something or someone instead of saying, okay, what should I do now when I feel this anger bubbling? And so it's troublesome to me, not because it's wrong, it's because I don't want to listen to it. I don't want to hear that I am wrong, not them. So think about some of our current stuff, some of our current places of being in connection with each other. Is there any place where you feel the other person is the one who should be liable to judgment and not you? Who is it?
Well, the fallacy to me in that statement is I make mistakes. I make mistakes when I'm driving. So I think sometimes people blow their horn at me because apparently I'm not going fast enough or something. Yeah. And what I have to recognize, because it's easy to get frustrated when we are out driving, real easy, especially when the snowbirds are here. And when they come back, and then when they leave, it's better, and then they come back again. But what I try to do real frequently, and I learned this a long time ago, is to say something like two things. I reverse it, but I say your delay or your whatever it is not my emergency. And by the same token, if I've delayed myself and I'm trying to get somewhere, and that's when frustration can set in, I have to go, my delay is not somebody else's emergency. And that seems to help settle me down and help me remember that I could have left sooner, or I could have taken more time, or to just realize that sometimes we're going to be in error because we're in a hurry, and that's what it's related to. And that kind of makes me refocus myself then.
Good, thank you. Go ahead. The hard part is that in those places that are conflicts for us, in those places where I see you absolutely doing something wrong, it is much easier for me to see you're wrong and not me wrong. So if I'm a fast driver, I see everyone else as being wrong because they're too slow. If I'm a slow driver, I see everyone else going too faster than they should.
Yeah.
The reality is neither driving fast or driving slow is a perfect right. But whichever speed we drive, it's really easy to put a judgment on someone else. And the thing that is wrong with that is what he talks about over here. If you're angry with, and it's that anger that's turning my heart against that brother or sister that ultimately is the harder thing. Not that they're right or wrong, because they might be wrong, but it's my anger with them that is the challenge. And yet that anger can make me feel self-righteous about myself and place myself in a space of superiority, when what I need to do is, from that space of anger, step into a space of humility and set that anger aside, that rightness aside. That's a spiritual move that belays many of my wanted physical and emotional needs. And so the passage troubles me because it doesn't say what would be easiest for me. So the next passage continues that, and it's a set of 3 different things that Jesus says that are about the same thing. If anyone strikes you on the right cheek, turn the other also. And to try to deflect those hurts in ways. There's the one about the second mile. Go with the person the second mile, not just the first. I don't like always to turn the right cheek, because for example, I think that because we turned the other cheek so much in the 90s, that we allowed the moral majority to become the only voice of Christianity. And because they were hurting our sensibilities, but we didn't say anything, in some ways, we have delved deeper into the divide that we are currently facing, because they were given all credence. And so you got to be careful in using this. It sometimes gets us into problems. And let me tell you a specific thing that I have with it. I think this is something that speaks more clearly to Earl and I, the men in the room, than what it ought to speak to the women in the room. Women tend to be better at turning a cheek, sometimes to their own detriment. And if the gospel is interpreted as meaning turn it again, to the point that I've had people who have been told by their pastor, yes, go back to your abusive husband. Forgive your abusive husband. And said that so many times as the abuse continued. That's not how this passage should be interpreted, I don't believe. But that's because it's being taken out of the cultural context.
I've always interpreted that to mean that if somebody does something to wrong you, that you should always give them a second chance. But at some point in time, you have to say, how many chances are another?
Sure. And when are appropriate boundaries the better answer?
Exactly. At what point in time do you say, go away? You're not going to bother me anymore. You're not going to hurt me anymore.
Yeah. But it's hard because obviously this has been interpreted a lot to be able to say the other message, to be able to further subjugation of women, to allow a majority race to subjugate the minority race, right? Oh, just turn the other cheek right now. That's not how it's supposed to be, but we often do that. So this one will always be troublesome because it doesn't have a perfect answer. Because I may be doing it right from my perspective, but I sit in a perspective of, white, male, relatively well-to-do, right? I have enough of everything, and so I have a lot of power in that situation. Yes.
I have a question about this because I'm wondering, as I'm sitting here struggling with it myself, whether is it possible that somehow in translation it has been misinterpreted in terms of the words that are used? Is there any possibility that it could be something different than what we're reading?
The answer to all those kinds of questions is always yes, because we don't know all the nuances, all the cultural background. One of the sister verses to this is the one about go the second mile, and it's contingent on a law in Israel that said that as a Roman in the Roman Empire, there was a rule that said that if a Roman soldier comes up to you, he can compel you to carry his things for a mile, right? And then so Jesus says you should carry the bags the second mile. We don't know that law really well. We don't have that law today, and so we don't understand that exactly, and we don't understand all the nuances of why Jesus would say that. So he says that some people have interpreted it as this: by going that second mile, suddenly you're the one in control, because he can't make you go, but you're continuing to do that. So he loses the power in that moment. Now that didn't quite sound like Jesus to me, but if I'm trying to figure out a more powerful way of viewing that, if I'm trying to step away from the imposition that somebody has put upon me, then I might interpret it that way. But we don't know all those nuances in the moment. We don't know what exactly the custom was about being struck. Why would somebody strike you on your cheek?
Jim, in my
Yes.
Bible, it said that a strike on the cheek is like the back of the hand, and it was an insult.
Uh-huh.
It's better to be insulted twice than take them to court and escalate.
Yes.
So it wasn't really a violent act, it was an insulting act.
Yeah. So it could be similar to what the French did to call somebody into a duel, right?
Yeah.
They would strike them with their gloves.
Yeah.
By not striking back, you're essentially not giving in to that which will kill one or another of you. We don't know. You're right. All we can do is speculate about what were the customs around this.
Mhm.
And we undoubtedly will get some of them not quite correct. So let's go to the next one, which comes just a little bit later. And the reason why this is tough for me is because forgiveness, I think, is at the core of good relationship and at the core of religious relationship. But it makes my relationship dependent on things that feels like it shouldn't be. So it says, if you do not forgive others, neither will your Father forgive you. So that takes God and puts him into a space of dependent on your actions. That God won't forgive because you didn't. And to me, is that really what I think God is like? Do I have power like that over God? Or is that grandness that is the divine not dependent on, not changed by my small actions towards this person?
If we look at that in the concept of God as an energy rather than, Father Christmas sitting on a cloud casting judgment,
Yes.
it also applies, that if you don't forgive someone, you carry that negative energy with you.
Yes.
And it just creates a torment. I think that I'm saying the wrong word. It creates a tension within your system that doesn't allow the clear energy to come in. Sandy, you can talk about this better than I can. But I'm thinking of the blackbirds in the holes.
Yeah, that's true.
And from, I don't remember the name of the book, the
gentle
Michael
art of
Ruiz
blessings.
book about the agreements, the 4 agreements.
The 4 agreements.
Well, it was the gentle art of blessing. Pierre, somebody.
Pierre de Chardin,
No,
or different?
the gentle art of blessing, it was.
The gentle art of
Blessing.
blessing.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I don't have it here in front of me.
I'm going to, as we look here, I'm going to look it up just so I can find that. So you guys keep talking, and I'll tell you the author of that in just a second.
But yeah, it just gives us, it clears your energy when you forgive somebody and you let something go that you've been holding against, holding within yourself as an anger, and you let that go. It clears your own energy so you can be healthier.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good way. That's a good way to be able to struggle past all of this. Here's the book, by the way, by Pierre Prodervand, The Gentle Art of Blessing.
Thank you. It was
Yes.
chapter 45.
Chapter 45.
I mean page, I think.
Okay. Oh, page 45. So the good news is it's a relatively cheap thing on Kindle, $12, a paperback for $9.99. So if that helps.
Yeah, it was a good one.
We read that as one of our books for the Friday book group.
Nice. Very good. The hard part is trying to turn this into the positive, like you guys are doing, instead of turning it into the negative that stands in my way of using it. If I only have where I started from, struggling with, is that what I want God to be like? Then sometimes I miss what can lead me out of this scripture. How can make me better? Because you're right, that my slights from other people damage my soul and cause me to stay in a space which is more distant from my best self and the best of the divine around me. Catherine, you look like you have something to say.
Yeah. It seems to me that the whole thing about forgiveness, because I think we have to turn it on ourselves as well, and for the very simple fact that if I am in unforgiveness of myself as well as others, that constitutes separation. So I think that's the paramount reason to think about forgiveness and want to quickly, agree and move forward. I think there's multiple reasons, such as you were talking about, Joyce, and there's plenty of arguments or reasons, as it were, to forgive.
I want to look at just one of the words you used, though, Catherine. The word quickly, which sometimes means, in my mind, because I'm a non-combatant, I try not to get into battles if I can help it. And so I don't draw a boundary sometimes when I need to. I'm too willing to just try to pass by and not really truly forgive, right? But just push it behind me and try to forget. And that's not helpful, because it leaves the issue unresolved and sometimes leaves the relationship in a space that is less than full.
Well, it occurs to me that along with, forgiveness is mindfulness about the forgiveness. And so I think that there's several steps that one might want to entertain in the process of forgiveness.
Yes.
Well, that might be a nice sermon or
Yeah.
meditation to ponder, but.
Yeah, it's a challenge. Forgiveness is not a simple thing, partially because we in America are culturally, we've set up other things as being more important than forgiveness, right? We've set up dominance, winning, having the right answer as more important than forgiveness, haven't we? And so for us, just culturally, we don't sit well in a space of forgiveness, or it doesn't sit well for us as we move into the rest of society. Because if we're trying to be forgiving people, it can put us in a place where people are easily trying to misuse that nature that we're trying to develop. So as we go on, then the next passage here, the remarkable nature of these three chapters in Matthew is that he continually throws thing after thing after thing that should make us stop and think, right? And it's why we all know the name Sermon on the Mount. It's because it is a profound piece of wisdom literature, trying to figure out how to live what's there. So the next part says, do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth. And in America, that's what we do on a regular basis. Look at the bookshelf behind me. And that's a small bookshelf compared to all of the books I have. I like having things like that. Right? And my profession rewards me for that, right? Yeah, look how smart. Here's some other books you should buy. So what kind of treasures do you store up?
Cat.
And what helps you to, what does life encourage you to store up?
I'm looking at all the junk
Yeah.
surrounding me. Yeah, it's just, books and all kinds of things. It's just hard letting those books go. They become old friends, or something that I have a lot of books that I haven't read yet that I'm going to get to one of these days. I think it goes back to not having resources when I was a kid to be able to look things up, and so now I want the paper, I want the physicality
Yes.
of these things there, and I'm finding that it would be so much easier to do it on the computer, but I don't trust the computers not to lose things. So I gotta have these books.
I moved a friend of mine named David one year when I was down in Peru. David is a Californian that lives down there, and he has boxes and boxes, seminary trained man, and he works a lot with Pastor Victor, and I'd known him for a couple of the different trips down there. Well, one day he's in Lima and he wants to get a whole bunch of boxes. And I'm telling you, it was a whole bunch of boxes of books mostly that he wanted us to carry to Pucallpa. And all of those were books that he'd gotten in seminary that were important to him. And I just go, wow, what would I do if I moved to Pucallpa sometime? Because all these books, they would be a weight on my soul. The good news is today we have Kindle, and I can get a whole bunch of those books on Kindle, right? And carry in one little thing, right? This little thing, I got all this library, but I'm not certain it completely takes away the weight. You know, even though it gets rid of all the boxes, still all of that kind of rests in there. But what I like about going to Peru is that they live without some of the weight of what our society says is necessary. Because they don't have the ability to have that necessary. So they don't have the newest pan that's out there. They don't have all the different books that I can buy on Amazon. And so they're not weighed down as much by that. Why do we allow ourselves to enter into the captivity of those things?
I think they become like old friends.
I think you're right.
You know, we just don't want to let things go that have some kind of a meaning for us.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I have books from when I was in grade school.
Yeah.
Believe it or not.
I do as well, and I love those books.
Yeah, I you know, someday I'm going to sit down and reread them.
Can I tell you part of why we do it though, Joyce? So let me tell you about our last two moves. We were down in Yuma for 7 years, and before that we were in the Phoenix area. Well, in the Phoenix area, even though I'd gone from two different professions, from elementary school to pastoring, and gone to several different churches, I'd lived in the same house, a house that that we owned for 20 some years. And so when we made that move from Phoenix down to Yuma, it was time to get rid of a lot of stuff. But there was a lot of other stuff that we held on to, but didn't really, a lot of it stayed in boxes when we got to Yuma. A lot of it got put on a shelf somewhere, but never to be used. And so then when we moved 7 years later, it was just long enough that we were kind of able to say, for 7 years, I haven't looked at that, haven't used it. It hasn't been as important to what I thought it was. And so it allowed us to let go of it. But the longer that we are in a certain situation, whether it's a profession or a house or whatever, the easier it is to accumulate that debris of life. And because I don't think we automatically sometimes take care of some of that. But those two moves allowed us to lighten up an awful lot. And so it got to me thinking, how do I intentionally do that with some of the other stuff that's weighing me down?
Mm-hmm.
So let me go to the next troublesome passage so you can see it. Do not worry about your life. And then in the next one, do not judge so that you may not be judged. That type of thing, the worries and our views of each other absolutely weigh down our lives a lot. But we feel really good about having those worries. And we feel even better usually about the judgments we make about other people. But that's not the point. We may even be right. but is it healthy for us? So think about who you might want to have a judgment against today, because there's some really good judgments to make. How does it weigh you down? How does it cause troublesome to enter your life? Think about your interpersonal relationships, maybe something with somebody who's close to you that is a strained relationship right now. My mother-in-law, Betty, carried for decades that she didn't talk to her brother, Daryl, over something that they couldn't even remember, right? I think she thinks she was right. And in the end, it didn't really matter. It mattered that she'd carried that weight for that amount of time. Think about our politics today. I think we're right in our politics, but how much weight do I carry in the midst of it? How much weight in my soul is there that I don't need to carry?
That's okay. Yeah, thanks.
The hard part is that there's no.
Jim?
Yes, Earl.
Yeah, we've lost our Zoom here somehow. We've still got the audio.
But you haven't got the video. We're about to finish anyway. You can see that the last two pieces of this are, one's the golden rule: in everything do to others as you would have others do to you. And at the end, not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter into heaven. What I want to show you is this last piece down here. These are some of my, I put down favorite, but with a question mark, my favorite troublesome passages. And what I'd like for you to do is try to look through these. To do that, I might need to send this to you so you can go through and look these up and just see what you think about them.
Yeah.
And that's where we can have our conversation next time. There's a way that I can do this. Does everyone know how to do the chat feature?
Let me see.
I'll show you what it is. Down on the bottom, there's a place where you can where you can click on chat. And if you click that up, it puts a bunch of stuff there. So watch what I'm going to put there in just a second. Did everyone click on the chat button?
Yep.
Yep.
You see that? So let me just do this real fast.
Can we print that though?
I can print this and I can send it to you, but I'm going to show you.
No. But can I print it off of what you're going to put in the
You
chat?
can cut and paste it. Watch.
Okay.
So there it is. There's all those passages. So if you just take and highlight all of those things with your mouse, then you can do a Control-C and then paste it into whatever document you want. Did that make sense to you?
Done. Now all I gotta do is find you again.
Yeah.
There. Okay.
Earl, did you figure that out?
No, we're at a thing. It's Zoom.
Okay.
Where to join a meeting and sign in. We can't seem to do anything from here.
Okay. So this is what I'll do. Catherine, were you able to figure it out?
Not totally, because the screen is so. Maybe I need to make the screen bigger. So
Maybe
that would help.
Yeah. Make it to a large screen.
Okay.
Did you get to the chat?
Yeah, I'm in chat, and I just need to do Control what, P?
Well, first of all, highlight it all.
I did.
And then do Control-C, which is copy.
Okay.
And then Control-P when you get over. Not right now. Go over to another document and do a Control-P in the other document, and it should paste it on there. So Control-C to copy, Control-P to paste.
Okay, so I guess what I'm trying to figure out is where I find another document to put this into.
Your word
do-
processor.
Do you use Word?
I don't really have Word, I don't
Okay.
think.
All right. So here's what I will do. If you will give me an email address, both Earl and Catherine, and I'll just send it to you that way. And Joyce, I will send it to you as well.
That's okay, I got it.
Okay. And I can send you this whole document that I've been using, kind of as our
Oh, okay.
agenda. I can send that whole document to you. So everything we've talked about that's on there.
Okay, I would like that.
Okay.
So I just typed it into that chat bar. So can you copy it from there then? It's a pretty simple one.
Did you push send? You have to push
Oh.
return at the end,
Okay.
and it should come up.
Okay. Okay. I'm not sure because it says
You typed it in. You typed it in down at the bottom. Type message here. You typed
Yeah.
it there, and then just push the return button, the enter buttons.
Oh, duh.
Got it.
Yeehaw.
So I'm highlighting that. Joyce, if you want to do the same thing, you can. Earl as well.
I've got mine saved into a Word document, so.
Okay,
Jim, I can give you my email address if you like
that's
that.
perfect. Give it right to me.
Yeah, EMASON
MASON
58203
58203
@yahoo.com.
at yahoo.com.
Mhm.
Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to show you what I just wrote, and the two of you make sure that I'm correct. Hold on just a second, and I'll show it to you.
And we are going to do that. I just have this thing that says Zoom up here.
Okay, so those are the email addresses that I have. Did I get that right?
We can't see it.
Oh, okay, so it's emason58203 at yahoo.com.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So I'll send that out to you. Read through those passages and
Perfect. Yeah.
what? And just find which of them are disturbing, troublesome, difficult for you. And then we'll talk about any of them you want to. Plus, look at your own passages. Which things in the Bible don't you like? Which things do you struggle with? And so the rest of however much time we want to do with this is us just looking at different passages and trying to give some kind of insights and support to each other. Okay?
All right.
All right. Thank you, my friends.
Thank you so
you.
much. It was
All right.
wonderful. Thanks.
Take care.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Jim.
Yeah. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye now. I think we all have to leave the meeting
Yeah.
maybe.
So I'm going to end
Okay.
the meeting, but down here in the bottom left corner is where it should say leave meeting for you. But I'm going to
Mine
go
is
ahead
in
and end it, and all of us will get out of here.